Over 30 years later, this case remains one of the most baffling mysteries in the small Midwestern city of Ashford, Illinois. A town where time seems to have stood still, and yet, one question has never stopped haunting both its residents and its police department. What really happened to Emily Carter on the night of November 14, 1992? The name Emily Carter may not mean much outside of Ashford, but within the city limits, it is etched into memory like a scar that refuses to fade. Emily was just 22 years old, a college student with a promising future ahead of her. She was studying criminology at Ashford Community College, fascinated by mysteries and eager to one day work in law enforcement herself. To friends and family, Emily was more than her ambitions. She was thoughtful, warm, and deeply curious. She had a tendency to jot down observations in a small notebook she carried everywhere, sometimes a quote from class, sometimes a sketch of a passerby. Her roommate and best friend, Jessica Miller, would later recall, "Emily was the kind of person who noticed things other people overlooked. She was always watching, always listening. She wanted to understand the world." The Ashford of the early 1990s was a city in decline. Once thriving on steel and factory jobs, the economic downturn of the late 70s had left it scarred with empty warehouses, shuttered storefronts, and neighborhoods that felt forgotten. By 1992, crime was rising, the police department was underfunded, and residents often whispered about streets you shouldn't walk after dark. Emily lived in a small apartment on Harrison Avenue, not far from the river. The area was modest but could feel unsettling at night. Street lamps flickered, alleys stretched into darkness, and one building in particular stood like a silent sentinel along her usual route home. The Riverside Mill, a massive, abandoned factory that locals swore was haunted. Teenagers dared each other to sneak inside its crumbling halls. Adults avoided it altogether. For Emily, unfortunately, it was simply part of the scenery on her nightly walk. That Saturday night, November 14, 1992, Emily had just finished her shift at Maggie's Place, a neon-lit diner that still exists today, almost unchanged. Maggie's was a favorite for late-night regulars, truck drivers, insomniac locals, and students looking for cheap coffee and pie. Everyone knew Emily there. Her last customers remembered her smile, the way she teased the cook about burning the fries, and how she seemed eager to finish her shift. Around 11:45 p.m., she said her goodbyes, slipped into her dark green jacket, and stepped outside into the cold November air. From Maggie's Place to her apartment was only 6 blocks. Emily had walked it countless times, but on this night, she never arrived. The following morning, Jessica awoke to find Emily's bed untouched. At first, she thought Emily might have stayed with a friend, but when she failed to show up for her next shift at the diner, something completely out of character, Jessica called the police. By mid-afternoon, word had spread quickly. Emily Carter was missing. At first, detectives speculated she might have left town willingly. After all, young people sometimes ran away or disappeared for a weekend, but Emily's family immediately pushed back. Her father, Richard Carter, a local mechanic, told police, "My daughter didn't just run off. She had school, she had work, she had plans. Something happened to her." Emily's mother, Mary, was quieter but firm. She knew her daughter's routines, her habits. Mary had spoken with Emily just the day before. Emily had laughed about a term paper she was struggling with and promised to come home for Sunday dinner. To Mary, the idea that Emily would vanish voluntarily was unthinkable. By November 16th, the local paper, the Ashford Gazette, published its first article, "College Student Missing After Night Shift." The piece included Emily's photo, her hazel eyes framed by shoulder-length brown hair, her smile both bright and haunting in hindsight. That photo would soon appear on flyers taped to telephone poles, grocery store windows, and gas stations across town. Community members came together quickly. Volunteers searched the riverbanks, the woods at the city's edge, and even the empty halls of the Riverside Mill. Dozens of people carried flashlights through the dark, calling her name. But each search ended in silence. No clothing, no purse, no footprints, nothing. The police assigned Detective Harold Jennings, a 20-year veteran, to the case. Jennings was known for his meticulous approach and his determination, yet even he admitted early on that this case was unlike anything he had encountered. There were no clear witnesses, no signs of struggle, and no physical evidence to suggest what had happened. One man claimed he saw Emily walking near the Riverside Bridge just after midnight, but his account was vague and unverified. Another said he thought he saw her getting into a dark-colored sedan, but he couldn't recall the license plate or even the make of the car. These scraps of information offered no clear direction, leaving Jennings with nothing solid to pursue. As days turned into weeks, fear spread through Ashford. Parents warned their daughters not to walk alone at night. Rumors flourished, some pointing to a shadowy figure who had been seen loitering near the diner, others to whispered tales of the Riverside Mill, where strange lights were said to flicker in the windows. For some, Emily's disappearance was evidence of a lurking predator. For others, it was the beginning of something darker, a story that blurred the line between crime and legend. By the first anniversary of her disappearance in November 1993, the Carter family organized a candlelight vigil in Ashford's town square. Over 200 people gathered, holding candles against the cold air. Richard addressed the crowd, his voice cracking as he pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. "Emily deserves to be found," he said. "She is more than a headline. She is our daughter." But the investigation remained at a standstill. Tips came and went. Leads fizzled out. The case grew colder with every passing month. Today, more than 3 decades later, Emily Carter's disappearance still lingers over Ashford. It is more than an unsolved crime. It is a wound that has never healed, a story that continues to stir fear, sorrow, and speculation. Perhaps it endures because it plays on our deepest fears. The idea that someone can walk a familiar street just blocks from home and vanish without a trace. Or perhaps it lasts because of the unanswered questions that have only grown more unsettling with time. Whatever the reason, Emily's story refuses to fade. And as we begin to retrace the final hours of her life, we will discover that the mystery is not just chilling. It is layered with strange twists, overlooked evidence, and chilling possibilities that have kept investigators, her family, and the people of Ashford searching for the truth to this day. To understand the mystery of Emily Carter's disappearance, we must carefully retrace the final hours of her life. Piece by piece, detail by detail, we will follow her steps that night and uncover the chilling inconsistencies that still puzzle investigators to this day. Saturday, November 14th, 1992. The weather in Ashford was cold, the kind of night where frost gathered on windshields and breath curled in the air. Emily's shift at Maggie's Place Diner began at 5 p.m. The diner was busy that night, filled with truck drivers, families grabbing a late meal, and students taking a break from studying. Co-workers later described Emily as being in good spirits. She laughed at jokes, hummed along to the radio behind the counter, and scribbled a few notes in her little notebook when business slowed. A waitress named Carolyn Lee remembered Emily mentioning she was behind on a criminology paper, but was planning to spend Sunday working on it. There was no hint, no warning, no sign that something unusual was about to happen. Around 9:30 p.m., a regular customer named Alan Brooks, a middle-aged man who often stopped by after his factory shift, chatted with Emily. He recalled later, "She seemed fine. She smiled, asked about my family, poured my coffee like always. Nothing seemed off." The final hours at the diner. The diner began to empty after 11 p.m. By then, only a handful of patrons remained, the cook in the back, a pair of truckers finishing their meals, and a young couple sitting near the window. At approximately 11:40 p.m., Emily hung up her apron, collected her tips, and put on her jacket. She said goodnight to Carolyn, waved to the truckers, and stepped outside into the night. This was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her alive. What should have been a 6-block walk home turned into one of the greatest mysteries Ashford has ever faced. The timeline of disappearance. Detectives later reconstructed Emily's final walk as best they could. 11:45 p.m. Emily leaves Maggie's Place. Witnesses confirm her direction toward Harrison Avenue. 11:50 p.m. A resident named Mrs. Dorothy Lang, who lived on Lincoln Street, reported seeing a young woman matching Emily's description walking quickly past her house. Dorothy recalled the girl kept glancing over her shoulder, as if uneasy. 4:55 p.m. Another resident, Peter Sanchez, claimed he heard the faint sound of a woman's voice near the corner of Harrison and 6th Street. He couldn't make out the words, but described it as tense, maybe arguing. When asked later if he thought it was Emily, he admitted he wasn't sure. Midnight. A man named Thomas Greer reported driving across the Riverside Bridge and noticing a figure standing alone near the mill entrance. He thought it was odd. Too late, too cold for anyone to be lingering there. He didn't stop. After midnight, the trail goes dark. Emily never arrived at her apartment. Witness accounts are always tricky. Memory is fragile, and details can shift with time. Yet several accounts stood out enough for detectives to file them carefully in their reports. One came from a college student named Rachel Donovan, who told police she thought she saw Emily speaking to someone in a parked car near Harrison Avenue around midnight. Rachel admitted she was walking back from a party and wasn't entirely sober, but she remembered the car as being dark, possibly navy or black, with tinted windows. She saw Emily leaning slightly toward the passenger side window, as if talking to the driver. When Rachel passed, she claimed the car drove off quickly, heading toward the river. Another account came from Mr. Harold Klein, a night security guard working near Broadway Avenue. Klein reported hearing what he described as a scream or shout carried on the wind around 12:15 a.m. He assumed it was teenagers messing around and didn't investigate. When Emily's disappearance made headlines, he admitted to police that the sound troubled him in hindsight. Then there was Martha Riley, who lived across from the Riverside Mill. She told detectives she saw strange, flickering lights in the upper windows of the abandoned factory around 12:30 a.m. At first, she thought kids had broken in. But when the story of Emily spread the next day, Martha began to wonder if she had witnessed something connected to the case. Detectives quickly realized how strange Emily's disappearance was. Normally, in missing persons cases, something is left behind. A shoe, a bag, a sign of struggle. But here, there was nothing. Emily's purse containing her student ID, wallet, and keys was never recovered. Her silver locket, a cherished gift from her mother, was also missing. Even the small notebook she carried everywhere had vanished. It was as though someone had erased her existence in the span of 15 minutes. Equally puzzling was the absence of reliable witnesses in an area that was not completely deserted. Between Dorothy Lang seeing Emily walk past, Peter Sanchez hearing voices, Rachel Donovan seeing a car, and Thomas Greer noticing someone near the mill, it seemed impossible that nobody had seen exactly what happened. And yet, no one had. Within days of Emily's disappearance, fear gripped the community. Parents forbade their daughters from walking alone at night. The diner where Emily worked grew eerily quiet during evening hours, the regular chatter replaced by worried conversations about safety. Rumors began to spread. Some claimed a stranger had been seen loitering near Maggie's place in the days before Emily vanished. Others whispered that someone from the college had become obsessed with her. And then there were those who spoke of the Riverside Mill, insisting that the strange lights and noises seen in the building were somehow connected. Detective Jennings, however, focused on more practical possibilities. He considered the chance of abduction, possibly by someone Emily knew, or perhaps a crime of opportunity committed by a passing motorist. But without evidence, every theory was little more than speculation. One detail rarely mentioned in early reports was a strange phone call received by the Carter family the day after Emily vanished. Richard Carter later told journalists that around 6:40 p.m. on November 15th, the phone rang. When he answered, there was silence on the line, except for faint breathing. Richard said, "I thought it was a prank, or maybe one of Emily's friends who didn't know yet. But now, I'll always wonder if it was connected." Phone records from 1992 were far less detailed than today's, and investigators were unable to trace the call. To this day, no one knows who was on the other end. By the end of November, search parties had covered the riverbanks, combed through abandoned lots, and swept the Riverside Mill from top to bottom. Nothing was found. Not a single article of clothing, not a single footprint, not a single trace of Emily Carter. Detective Jennings admitted at a press conference, "It is as though she simply vanished into thin air." For the Carter family, the lack of evidence was devastating. Mary Carter later said, "I prayed they would find anything, her locket, her notebook, something. But there was nothing. It was like she was erased." And so, what began as a missing person S case quickly grew into something larger, a riddle that no one could solve. The timeline raised more questions than answers. Did Emily willingly approach someone in a car? Was she followed from the diner? Did she make it as far as the Riverside Mill? And what about the strange lights reported that night? Every possibility seemed to collapse into uncertainty. As investigators dug deeper, the mystery only grew stranger. Overlooked clues, questionable suspects, and eerie coincidences began to surface. And soon the case would take on a chilling new dimension, one that blurred the line between crime and something far darker. As the initial searches came up empty, detectives shifted their focus to the deeper details of Emily Carter's disappearance. Overlooked clues, ambiguous witness statements, and mysterious evidence began to surface. And suddenly, what seemed like a simple missing person case grew far more complex, far more dangerous. Detective Harold Jennings decided to revisit Maggie's place, the diner where Emily had worked. Though it seemed ordinary on the surface, something in the sequence of her last movements didn't add up. Jennings examined the cash register, the back door, even the alley behind the building. Carolyn Lee, Emily's co-worker, recalled that a man had been in the diner intermittently that evening. Marcus Heller, a local delivery driver, had been spotted near the diner several times between 9 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. Witnesses described him as loitering, though no one remembered any interaction with Emily. Detectives questioned Heller multiple times. He had a seemingly solid alibi. He claimed to have been making deliveries across the northern edge of town, but his nervous demeanor raised suspicion. Adding to the unease, a nearby trash bin contained scraps of paper that seemed insignificant at the time. They were receipts, a coffee napkin with faint pencil markings, and one small folded note that had been overlooked in the initial sweep. The note contained scribbled numbers and letters, a cryptic sequence, H422 R511 1203. Detectives weren't sure if it was a random code, a phone number, or perhaps a reference only Emily would understand. The note was preserved, but its meaning would remain elusive for decades. Investigators turned their attention to the Riverside Mill, the abandoned factory along Emily's route home. Though the building had been vacant for over a decade, reports of strange activity in the weeks after her disappearance made it a focal point. Martha Riley, the resident who had noticed flickering lights in the mill the night Emily vanished, provided a sketch of what she saw. A dim figure moving across the broken windows, pausing briefly as though looking down toward the street. Investigators attempted to match the sketch to known individuals, but it bore no resemblance to any of the known suspects at the time. Security checks revealed something even more disturbing. A small metal locker inside the mill, previously thought empty, contained traces of recent human activity. Faint footprints, a smudge of mud on the floor, and cigarette butts of a brand not sold in Ashford for years. Forensics couldn't conclusively link these items to Emily, but the implication was chilling. Someone had been using the mill in secret, possibly on the night she disappeared. One of the earliest suspects was Timothy Klein, a fellow criminology student and acquaintance of Emily. Klein had been seen on campus speaking with her on multiple occasions, though their relationship was described as casual. Police records showed Klein had borrowed Emily's campus notes in the weeks prior to her disappearance. When questioned, he claimed he had simply wanted help understanding a difficult assignment. Yet, investigators noted he was unusually defensive when asked about the night she vanished. Klein passed a polygraph test, but polygraphs are not foolproof. Detectives kept him in the file as a person of interest, the first of several people who might have had the opportunity, but no confirmed motive. After Emily vanished, the Carter family reported several mysterious calls to their home. Most were silent, some carried heavy breathing, and one included a faint whisper. "She's not far." Detective Jennings traced one call to a payphone near Broadway Avenue, but it had been used and discarded, the user never identified. Investigators speculated that the calls could have been someone watching the family, a cruel prank, or a lead that had yet to make sense. These calls added to the growing tension and paranoia surrounding the case. In later interviews, witnesses recalled small but significant details. Peter Sanchez, who reported hearing a tense voice near Harrison and 6th Street, later remembered a flash of a vehicle's headlights shortly after. He couldn't recall the color, but he said it startled him. Rachel Donovan, the college student, clarified her statement years later. The car Emily approached had a faint emblem resembling a delivery company logo. Could it have been Marcus Heller's vehicle, or someone else entirely? The lack of immediate clarity made these observations frustrating, but each one became a piece in a puzzle that refused to fit together neatly. Beyond the diner and the mill, investigators explored secondary locations connected to Emily: her apartment, the riverfront, and a small abandoned park called Cedar Hollow. At her apartment, nothing seemed out of place, except for her silver locket, missing from her dresser. Detectives speculated it had been taken either by Emily's abductor or misplaced in a panic. At Cedar Hollow Park, dog walkers reported seeing strange markings on the ground, circular impressions that could have been tire tracks, but they did not match any known vehicle in the area. Forensics later determined the soil had been disturbed recently, but no conclusive evidence of Emily's presence was found. The riverfront, once a quiet refuge, revealed nothing. No footprints in the mud, no clothing, no personal effects. The only clue was a small piece of fabric snagged on a branch, later determined to be from a common type of denim. Nothing conclusively linked to Emily. Forensics in 1992 were limited compared to today. DNA testing was still emerging, and surveillance cameras were almost non-existent. Detectives relied heavily on witness statements, physical evidence, and behavioral profiling. Analysis of the cigarette butts in the Riverside Mill showed traces of nicotine and ash from a European brand, unusual in Ashford at the time. Fingerprints were collected, but contamination and degradation left them largely unusable. Even so, the possibility that someone had been in the mill that night added a new layer of suspicion. Forensic experts later noted that the pattern of Emily's disappearance resembled other cases where victims vanished quickly and methodically, suggesting premeditation or professional planning. But if so, who could have orchestrated such a disappearance without leaving any trace? Over the years, several other suspects emerged. Marcus DeLuca, a delivery driver who occasionally parked near Emily's route. He denied involvement, and alibis checked out for the critical window. Linda Hayes, a neighbor who reportedly had conflicts with Emily over noise complaints. She had no criminal history, but some neighbors recalled her making cryptic comments about Emily leaving town. A mysterious male figure, never identified, seen briefly near the Riverside Bridge and quickly disappearing into the shadows. Witness accounts conflicted about his appearance, making him impossible to track. Each suspect had a story, each presented a possible lead, and each ultimately proved inconclusive, deepening the mystery rather than resolving it. The more detectives investigated, the stranger the case became. Consider these unresolved details. The folded note found behind the diner. What did those numbers mean? Could they indicate a location, a time, or a code Emily understood? The Riverside Mill cigarette butts. Who left them, and why choose a European brand so rare in Ashford? The silent phone calls to the Carter family. Was it a prank, a warning, or someone toying with the family? And the flash of the vehicle headlights, the figure in the mill. Were these random events, or were they part of a chilling orchestration? Each clue taken alone is puzzling. Together, they form a web of possibilities that investigators have spent decades trying to untangle. By the end of this phase of the investigation, one thing was clear. Emily Carter's disappearance was no ordinary case. There were suspects, yes, but no motive. There were clues, yes, but none pointed definitively to her fate. And there were strange, inexplicable details that suggested someone, or something, had deliberately erased her from view. The question remained, who or what was responsible, and why? Up until this point, Emily Carter's disappearance could have been explained as a tragic, if baffling, crime. But what came next would push the case into far darker and stranger territory. It was here, in the shadows of overlooked evidence and chilling testimony, that the story transformed from an unsolved crime into something far more unsettling. In the winter of 1994, nearly 2 years after Emily vanished, investigators returned once more to the Riverside Mill. The massive factory had become a symbol of fear for locals. Rumors swirled about eerie noises at night, shadows moving in the broken windows, and faint cries carried on the wind. Detective Jennings, still haunted by his inability to solve the case, ordered a more thorough inspection. This time, search dogs were brought inside. Near the second-floor catwalk, the dogs began to bark uncontrollably at a rusted metal locker, half buried beneath fallen beams. Inside, investigators found a disturbing collection of items. A green button, almost identical to one from Emily's jacket. A torn page from a notebook containing faint handwriting. Forensic analysis later suggested the writing resembled Emily's. Though damaged, it contained half a sentence. "If anything happens," followed by an illegible smear. And perhaps most chilling, a scrap of cloth with reddish-brown stains, later confirmed as human blood. The blood sample was too degraded for conclusive DNA testing at the time, but the discovery reignited fears that Emily had been held inside the mill, possibly alive for some time after her disappearance. Shortly after the locker discovery, reports of paranormal activity around the mill spiked. Local teenagers swore they heard a woman's voice calling for help inside the structure late at night. Others claimed to see a figure resembling Emily standing at the windows, only to vanish when approached. Even Detective Jennings admitted something unnerving. On one late-night walkthrough, he described hearing footsteps echoing above him, even though the floor above had collapsed years earlier. The Ashford Gazette ran sensational headlines. "Is Riverside Mill haunted by Emily Carter?" Though police dismissed these claims publicly, the rumors spread like wildfire. The case had officially crossed the line between crime investigation and urban legend. By 1997, 5 years had passed without resolution. But then, an unexpected piece of evidence surfaced. A fisherman along the Ashford River found a leather shoe, partially buried in mud. Inside, faintly scratched into the insole, were the initials EC. Tests suggested the shoe was from the early 1990s, consistent with the type Emily owned. But there was something else. Fibers on the shoe matched carpeting from a car, specifically a 1989 dark blue sedan. This was the first tangible clue linking Emily's disappearance to a vehicle. Investigators revisited earlier witness statements. The vague accounts of a dark car suddenly seemed crucial. And suspicion fell once again on Marcus Heller, the delivery driver with inconsistent alibis. Heller's interrogation. When confronted in 1997, Heller was evasive. He admitted he drove a 1989 sedan, but insisted it had been sold months before Emily's disappearance. Records, however, suggested otherwise. Inconsistencies in his story grew, and some detectives believed he had been stalking Emily. But then came a twist. Heller abruptly left Ashford in late 1997, disappearing to another state. Without concrete evidence tying him to the shoe or the blood-stained cloth from the mill, prosecutors couldn't move forward. Heller became a fugitive of sorts, not charged, but forever shadowed by suspicion. In 2001, nearly a decade after Emily vanished, police received a startling confession. A drifter named Carl Jennings, no relation to Detective Harold Jennings, claimed responsibility for Emily's disappearance. He described picking her up near Harrison Avenue, driving her toward the mill, and leaving her near the river. But his story was riddled with inaccuracies. He got the date wrong, misdescribed her clothing, and couldn't point to any physical evidence. Some believed he was seeking notoriety, others suspected he was mentally unstable. Yet one detail chilled investigators. He mentioned a folded note with numbers, almost exactly like the one found near the diner in 1992. How could he have known about it? Police never released that detail to the public. Carl Jennings later retracted his confession, claiming he had dreams about Emily that felt real. Detectives dismissed him as unreliable, but the eerie overlap kept the case alive in whispers. By the early 2000s, forensic science had advanced. The blood sample from the locker in the mill was retested. Results confirmed it was Emily's blood type. This revelation transformed the investigation. Emily had almost certainly been inside the Riverside Mill at some point after her disappearance. But was it the site of her captivity? Or was the evidence planted to mislead? Detective Harold Jennings, by then nearing retirement, admitted publicly, "The mill holds the answer. I'm convinced of it. But something, or someone, is keeping that answer hidden." The paranormal side of the case reached its peak in the mid-2000s. Ghost hunting groups visited Ashford, documenting strange phenomena at the mill. Cold spots, electronic interference, and faint recordings of what sounded like a woman's voice repeating, "Help me." Skeptics dismissed it as coincidence, echoes, or fabrication. But even seasoned investigators admitted the timing was unnerving. Many of the phenomena occurred on or near the anniversary of Emily Yest's disappearance. Mary Carter, Emily's mother, visited the mill in 2005 during a candlelight vigil. Witnesses claimed she collapsed suddenly, whispering, I heard her call my name." In 2012, 2 decades after the disappearance, a shocking twist surfaced. A former janitor who had worked near the diner in 1992 came forward with a confession of his own. Anthony Graves, then in his 70s, revealed that he had seen Emily leave Maggie's place on that cold November night. But he also claimed he saw her willingly approach the dark sedan, not forced, but as if she knew the driver. Graves insisted he remained silent out of fear, claiming he believed the driver was someone powerful in the community. He never named the person, but he hinted it was someone who could make people disappear. The statement was vague, unverifiable, and came decades too late. But it reignited suspicion not just of random predators, but of hidden connections within Ashford itself. By the 2010s, 3 dominant theories emerged. The stalker theory. Emily was followed by Marcus Heller or another local predator who abducted her, possibly using the mill as a holding site. The voluntary meeting theory. She knew the person in the car and entered willingly, suggesting betrayal by someone close to her. The paranormal theory, Emily's disappearance involved supernatural elements, fueled by the haunting reports at the mill. Each theory had evidence, none had proof. And so, what began as a straightforward missing persons case had twisted into something far more unsettling. A tangle of suspects, blood evidence, confessions, and shadows that defied explanation. Emily Carter's disappearance was no longer just a question of who. It had become, and perhaps most terrifying of all, whether the truth was buried in human hands or hidden within something we can't fully understand. 3 decades have passed since Emily Carter vanished into the cold November night. And yet, here in Ashford, Illinois, her name remains spoken in hushed voices, her face remembered, her story retold. Though countless hours of investigation, evidence, and testimony have been gathered, the truth of what happened to Emily has never been uncovered. What remains instead is mystery. For law enforcement, Emily's disappearance has become more than just another file in the archives. To this day, it is referred to in the Ashford Police Department as the Carter case, a case that has outlived 3 police chiefs, spanned generations of detectives, and still lingers unsolved. Detective Harold Jennings, who spent nearly 20 years on the case, once admitted in a rare interview, "There are nights I wake up thinking about her, about the shoe in the mud, the blood in the locker, the calls to her family. It's like she's everywhere and nowhere all at once, and that is what haunts me." But the police aren't the only ones haunted. For the people of Ashford, Emily's story has become a thread woven into the town's identity. Restaurants hang her photo, vigils are held every November, and newcomers inevitably hear the tale within weeks of arriving. Emily Carter has become both a memory and a legend. Let's step back and consider the major evidence that has shaped the story. The folded note, with cryptic numbers and letters. Was it Emily's? A message she left behind? Or something planted by her abductor? The locker in the mill, containing a button from Emily's jacket, a torn notebook page, and blood later confirmed to match her blood type. Proof she was there, or evidence staged to make us believe she was? The shoe by the river, with initials scratched inside and fibers from a 1989 sedan. Was this a breadcrumb left behind, or a discarded item to throw detectives off the trail? The silent phone calls, unnerving and specific, including the whisper, She's not far. Who made them, and why did they stop? The eyewitness accounts: a car, a figure in the mill, a voice near Harrison Avenue. Were they all describing the same event, or fragments of multiple overlapping stories? Taken together, these clues suggest Emily was abducted, possibly taken to the Riverside Mill, and later transported in a vehicle. But every piece of evidence has cracks. Every clue is accompanied by questions that only deepen the mystery. When we look at suspects, the web grows even murkier. Marcus Heller, the delivery driver, whose sedan matched the shoe fibers, and whose alibi shifted over time. Did he stalk Emily? Or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Timothy Klein, the fellow student, defensive under questioning, with possible access to Emily's notes and schedule. Was it an obsession gone too far? Anthony Graves, the janitor who claimed she willingly entered a car, hinting at a powerful figure in town. Was he protecting someone, or inventing a story decades later for attention? The unnamed figure, reported at the bridge near the mill and possibly linked to the cigarette butts of a rare European brand. Was this the real culprit, operating in plain sight but never identified? Each suspect has threads connecting them to Emily's disappearance, yet none can be tied definitively. It is a puzzle with missing pieces that may still be out there. Of course, no retelling of Emily Carter's story is complete without addressing the paranormal claims that have surrounded it for decades. Voices in the mill, figures in the windows, cold spots, and whispered pleas for help. These aren't just campfire tales. They've been reported by dozens of people over 30 years, from teenagers to police officers to Emily's own mother. Skeptics argue these experiences are the product of suggestion, of a town desperate for answers seeing patterns in shadows. Psychologists point to the phenomenon of collective haunting, where grief and fear manifest as shared experiences. And yet others believe Emily's spirit lingers at the Riverside Mill, bound to the place where she may have suffered, unable to move on until her story is told. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the fact remains: the paranormal has become inseparable from the case. In many ways, it has kept Emily's memory alive, ensuring her name is never forgotten. After 30 years, 3 primary theories continue to divide opinion. The abduction theory. Emily was targeted by a predator, possibly Heller, and taken against her will. The mill was used as a temporary holding site, and she was later transported elsewhere. The evidence supports this: the blood, the shoe, the car sightings. Yet no body was ever found, no closure achieved. Emily entered the car willingly, believing she knew the driver. If true, it means someone she trusted betrayed her. Graves's confession points in this direction, though he never named the driver. If this theory is true, the crime may have been covered up by someone with influence in Ashford. Emily's disappearance defies rational explanation. The eerie timing of paranormal phenomena, the whispers, the sightings, some believe she was caught in something otherworldly. A victim, not of a man, but of a mystery that transcends human understanding. For Emily's family, none of these theories matter as much as one thing: closure. Her parents, Richard and Mary, have carried the weight of her absence for over 30 years. Every holiday, every birthday, every quiet evening is marked by the void she left behind. Mary once said in an interview, "People ask me if I believe she's alive. I don't know anymore. What I do know is that wherever she is, she deserves to be found. She deserves peace." Richard added, "The worst part isn't the not knowing. It's the silence. It's the fact that someone out there knows, and they chose to keep it hidden." Their words are a reminder that behind every mystery is a family broken by unanswered questions. Today, Emily Carter's disappearance remains officially unsolved. The Riverside Mill still stands, abandoned, decaying, and avoided by most. The police file is thick with reports but thin on answers. The Carter family still hopes for resolution, but time has only deepened the shadows. Every few years, a new tip surfaces. Every few years, a new theory gains traction. But the truth remains locked away, hidden in the darkness of that November night. And so, we are left with questions. Who was behind the wheel of the dark sedan? Who made the silent phone calls? Who left the blood in the locker? And why, after 30 years, has no one come forward with the truth? These questions remain unanswered, but perhaps not forever. Now, it's your turn. Do you believe Emily was abducted by a stalker like Heller? Do you believe she trusted someone she knew, only to be betrayed? Or do you believe the paranormal claims that Emily S.'s presence still lingers at the Riverside Mill? Leave your theories in the comments below. Share your perspective, your instincts, your analysis. Because sometimes the key to solving mysteries isn't tea in police files. It is rest in the collective insight of those who refuse to let the story be forgotten. And if you want to see more deep dives into unsolved cases and chilling mysteries like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every week, we explore the cases that still haunt communities, searching for the answers that time has tried to bury.